April 14th, 2003, Louvain's prison, south of France. One helicopter, hovering above the same prison, again. And the craziest part, Pascal Payet was already free. He had escaped 2 years earlier. He came back, not to surrender, to rescue his friends. Pascal Payet was a fugitive with a 30-year sentence hanging over his head. Most escaped convicts run as far as they can and never look back. Payet hijacked another helicopter, flew straight back to the prison he had escaped from, and broke out 3 of his accomplices in broad daylight. But this isn't just a story about criminal loyalty. It's about the steel anti-helicopter net the prison installed after his first escape, the net he cut through in minutes. The guards who watched helplessly as he mocked everything they had built to stop him, and the third helicopter escape 4 years later that proved even maximum security couldn't hold him. After his final escape, he got plastic surgery to change his face, then used his real name at expensive restaurants, while every cop in France was hunting him. This is how one man escaped prison by helicopter, came back to the same prison to rescue his friends, escaped again, and became the only person in history to pull off 3 helicopter prison breaks. Pascal Payet was born on July 7th, 1963, in Montpellier, a sun-drenched city in southern France. But Payet wouldn't stay there long. His family moved to Lyon when he was still a child. He was raised primarily by his mother and stepfather in the working-class neighborhoods of France's third-largest city. His childhood was unremarkable. No signs of the criminal mastermind he would become, no violent outbursts, no trouble with authorities, just a quiet boy who showed little interest in school. Education bored him. The classroom felt like a cage. As a young adult, Payet moved again, this time to Marseille, France's oldest city, a port town with a reputation for both beauty and danger, the kind of place where legitimate business and organized crime often shared the same streets. Marseille would shape everything that followed. By the late 1980s, Payet had found his calling, crime. In 1988, at age 25, he received his first serious conviction, aggravated assault. 5 years later, in 1993, another conviction for conspiracy. He was building connections, learning how the underworld operated. But these early crimes were just practice. The real show was about to begin. What happens when a man with no fear meets an opportunity too big to resist? November 20th, 1997, Salon de Provence, a quiet town about 50 kilometers north of Marseille. Payet and his associates had been planning this for months. Their target was an armored vehicle belonging to the Banque de France, a cash-in transit van carrying enough money to set them up for years. This wasn't a street robbery. This was military precision meets criminal ambition. Multiple vehicles, multiple accomplices, coordinated timing. Payet's weapon of choice was a Kalashnikov assault rifle. That choice would earn him a nickname that would follow him for decades, Kalashnikov Pat. The robbery began according to plan. The armored vehicle was intercepted. The crew moved in. Everything was happening fast. But then something went wrong. Security guard Gerard Casselis refused to comply. He resisted. Payet opened fire, 14 bullets. The guard died on the scene. What started as an armed robbery became a murder case. Payet fled the scene with his accomplices. The money was never fully recovered. 90,000 euros vanished into thin air. But freedom doesn't last forever when you have killed a man in broad daylight. January 1999, Paris. French police caught up with Payet and his associate Eric Alboreo. The arrest was swift. The charges were severe, murder committed during an armed robbery. 30 years. Payet was transported to Louvain's prison in the Bouches-du-Rhône department. This facility had existed for over 2 centuries. It had seen France's most dangerous criminals pass through its gates. The prison had been rebuilt numerous times, and its latest version was considered one of the most technologically advanced in all of France. The guards called it escape-proof. How do you escape from a prison that no one has ever escaped from? Payet looked at those walls and saw something different. He didn't see obstacles, he saw opportunities. The exercise yard had a weakness, a neutral zone that wasn't covered by anti-escape wires, a blind spot invisible from the watchtowers. Prison unions had warned about this vulnerability for a decade. No one listened. Payet listened. For 2 years, he observed, he planned. He coordinated with a man on the outside named Frédéric Impoko. Every detail was mapped. Every second was calculated. The plan was audacious. A helicopter would be hijacked mid-flight. The pilot would be forced at gunpoint to fly to the prison. The helicopter would hover over the unprotected courtyard. Tools would be dropped. Payet and another inmate would cut through the fence, climb a rope ladder, and fly to freedom. Simple in concept, nearly impossible in execution. But Payet wasn't interested in impossible. October 12th, 2001, the day had finally arrived. At the Aix-les Mills Aerodrome, an armed accomplice approached a helicopter from Hilly Network International. The pilot had no warning. One moment he was preparing for a routine flight. The next, he was staring at a gun. The hijacker's instructions were clear. Fly to Luynes prison, hover over the exercise yard, don't try to be a hero. The pilot complied. The helicopter appeared above the prison. Guards looked up in confusion. What was happening? This wasn't scheduled. This wasn't normal. A bag dropped from the helicopter. Inside were cutting tools. Payet moved fast. He grabbed the tools, started cutting through the fence. Another inmate, Frédéric Impoko, who was serving a life sentence for kidnapping and murder, worked alongside him. The guards couldn't intervene. The blind angles prevented gunfire. By the time anyone understood what was happening, it was too late. A rope ladder descended from the helicopter. Payet grabbed it first. He climbed, hand over hand, toward the sky, toward freedom. Impoko followed. The helicopter tilted, gained altitude, and flew away from Luynes prison. The entire operation took less than 2 minutes. Inside the prison, alarms finally started ringing. Guards scrambled, phones rang, but the helicopter was already a dot on the horizon. Pascal Payet had done the impossible. He had escaped from an escape-proof prison. The helicopter landed in a field. Payet and Impoko disappeared into the French countryside. The pilot was released unharmed. And then they were out, southern France. October 2001. The air tasted different. For the first time in nearly 3 years, no walls, no bars, no guards counting heads. Just the open countryside stretching in every direction. For Payet, it must have felt like resurrection. But freedom comes with its own challenges. French authorities were stunned. The manhunt began immediately. Every police department in France received Payet's photograph. Every airport, train station, and border crossing was alerted. 6 days later, on October 18th, 2001, Impoko was captured in Paris, but Payet remained free. What would you do with your freedom if you just pulled off the impossible? Most escaped convicts would run as far as possible, change their identity, leave the country. Payet returned to crime. For 20 months, he stayed hidden in France. He robbed small-time jewelry stores. He lived off the profits. He planned his next move. But something was eating at him. His friends were still behind bars, the same men who had been arrested with him in 1999, the same men who had trusted him. Eric Alboreo, Frank Perletto, Michel Valero, they were still inside Luynes prison. Most fugitives would feel bad for a moment and then move on. Self-preservation comes first. But Payet wasn't most fugitives. Remember that prison he escaped from? He was about to see it again. April 14th, 2003, 20 months after his first escape. Payet made a decision that would define his legend. He was going back to Luynes prison, not to surrender, to rescue his friends. The French prison system had learned from Payet's escape. At least, they thought they had. A steel anti-helicopter net had been installed over the exercise yard, high-tension cables designed to tangle rotor blades. The vulnerability that Payet had exploited was now protected. The guards felt confident. Whatever trick Payet had used, it wouldn't work again. They were wrong. Another helicopter was hijacked in the Marseille area. The pilot was forced at gunpoint to fly to Louin's prison, just like before. But this time, Payet wasn't inside the prison. He was outside, coordinating everything. The helicopter appeared above Louin's prison. The guards recognized what was happening, but they hadn't trained for what came next. Two of Payet's accomplices descended commando style from the helicopter. They dropped onto the steel anti-helicopter net, the net that was supposed to stop them. They produced saws, and they started cutting through the metal cables. The guards watched in disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. Within minutes, the hole was large enough. A ladder dropped through the opening. 3 inmates climbed up: Frank Perletto, Michel Valero, Eric Alboreo, the same Eric Alboreo who had been arrested with Payet in 1999. The helicopter flew to a nearby sports stadium. The men transferred to a waiting car, and they vanished. Pascal Payet had just broken his friends out of the same prison he had escaped from 2 years earlier, using the same method, through the security measures specifically designed to stop him. He hadn't just escaped, he had returned. He had mocked their upgrades. He had cut through their anti-helicopter net like it was paper. French authorities were humiliated on a national scale. But this time, the freedom was shorter. 3 weeks later, the 3 rescued inmates were recaptured. Payet himself was caught several months later in 2003. The court showed no mercy. January 7th, 2005. Payet stood trial for the 1997 murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Witness statements, forensic evidence, his role as the shooter. Payet denied intent to kill. He claimed he had aimed for the guard's legs. The court didn't believe him. 30 years for murder. In January 2007, he confessed to organizing the 2003 escape. 7 more years. 6 more years for his own escape in 2001. Total sentence, 43 years. Would 43 years finally be enough to keep Pascal Payet behind bars? Payet was transferred to Grasse prison in the Alpes-Maritimes department. He was classified as a détenu particulièrement surveillé, a prisoner under especially high surveillance. The restrictions were severe: permanent solitary confinement, constant surveillance, and he was never kept at the same prison for more than 6 months. By July 2007, Payet was one of the most closely monitored prisoners in all of France. But Payet had friends on the outside, friends who were planning something spectacular. July 14th, 2007, Bastille Day. The irony was perfect. Bastille Day celebrates the storming of a prison, the beginning of the French Revolution. Payet was about to celebrate in his own way. At Condé-Mandelieu Airport, shortly before 6 p.m., 4 masked men approached a helicopter operated by Azur Hélicoptère. The pilot, Hervé Rougier, had no warning. One of the men pointed a gun at him. The instructions were simple: fly to Grasse prison, land on the roof, don't resist. The pilot chose to cooperate. The flight took approximately 5 minutes. 5 minutes from the glamorous resort town of Cannes to a maximum security prison. Outside the prison, fireworks lit up the sky, families celebrated. No one was paying attention to the helicopter approaching from the south. The helicopter landed on the roof of Grasse prison. The 4 accomplices moved fast. They deployed a disc cutter. They breached the isolation ward's perimeter. The noise of the fireworks masked the sound of their tools. Payet was ready. He had maneuvered to the rooftop. The guards were caught completely off guard. The Bastille Day celebrations had reduced vigilance. By the time anyone realized what was happening, Payet was climbing into the helicopter. 5 minutes. That's all it took. the helicopter rose from the roof of Grasse prison. It carried Pascal Payet to his third helicopter escape. The aircraft flew to a field in La Roquette-sur-Sion for a brief stop. Then it continued to a hospital parking lot in Brignoles, approximately 100 kilometers northeast. The pilot was doused with a fire extinguisher, bound, but left unharmed. Payet and his accomplices fled on foot. When asked later about the experience, the pilot said there was no violence. They told me if I followed orders, there would be no harm. And then freedom arrived once more, the Mediterranean coast, early evening. For the third time, Pascal Payet had walked out of a maximum security prison. No guards, no cells, no 6-month transfers. Just the open road and the fading Bastille Day fireworks in the distance. But how long could victory last this time? 2 days after the escape, on July 16, 2007, a European arrest warrant was issued against Pascal Payet. Every police department on the continent received his photograph. But Payet had learned from his previous escapes. This time, he took extra precautions. Shortly after fleeing, Payet traveled to La Ciotat in the Bouches-du-Rhône department. There, he underwent facial plastic surgery. The goal was to become unrecognizable to investigators. For 2 months, it worked. Payet relocated to Spain. He hid in the Catalonia region, north of Barcelona. He believed he was safe. He celebrated at expensive restaurants. He used credit cards. He relaxed. That relaxation was his mistake. September 21st, 2007, Mataró, Spain. Spanish police, working with France's Dirección Centrale de la Police Judiciaire, tracked Payet to a town about 30 kilometers north of Barcelona. At approximately 4 p.m. local time, officers moved in. Payet was armed. He could have resisted. He could have tried to shoot his way out. He didn't. For the first time in his criminal career, Pascal Payet surrendered without a fight. 2 accomplices were also detained, Alain Armato and Farid Ouassou. Payet was transferred to French custody on October 4th, 2007. This time, the authorities were taking no chances. His prison location was classified as secret. The sentences piled up. June 25th, 2008, 15 years for armed robberies and assaults against police officers committed while he was on the run. April 8th, 2011, 5 years for the 2007 escape. Total accumulated sentence, over 60 years. What drove Pascal Payet to escape 3 times? Why did he risk adding decades to his sentence? The answer might lie in his actions, not his first escape. That was survival. But his second escape, the one where he came back. He was free. He could have run to any country in the world. Instead, he hijacked another helicopter and flew straight back to the prison that had held him, to rescue friends who couldn't rescue themselves. Some men can't stand being caged. Some men will risk everything for freedom. But Pascal Payet risked his freedom for loyalty. That's what made him different. That's what made him a legend. Payet challenged his detention conditions in the European Court of Human Rights. In 2011, the court found that some of his isolation conditions violated Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The court awarded him 17,000 euros in damages. But the sentence stood. Pascal Payet's escapes changed French prison security forever. The government allocated approximately 43 million euros over 5 years to strengthen aerial defenses at prisons nationwide. Steel cables called filins anti-helicoptère were installed over courtyards and rooftops. These high-tension wires could damage helicopter rotor blades and make landings impossible. Detection systems for low-flying aircraft were added to high-security units. New regulations required electronic payments for helicopter rentals, making anonymous procurement more difficult. All because of one man who refused to accept his cage. To this day, Pascal Payet holds the record for planning the most helicopter prison escapes in history. 3 escapes, 3 hijacked helicopters, 1 legend. He was released on parole in April 2019, after serving approximately 12 years following his final recapture. French authorities no longer disclose his location. The king of escape is free, legitimately this time, but the question remains. The question that has followed Pascal Payet since that second helicopter appeared above Louane's prison in 2003. Why did he go back? He had escaped. He was free. He had beaten the system. And then he risked everything to return to the same prison, cut through the same security, and rescue the friends who couldn't rescue themselves. Most criminals think only of themselves. Payet thought of his crew. Most fugitives run and never look back. Payet came back. 3 helicopters, 3 escapes. 1 man who proved that escape-proof is just a challenge waiting to be accepted. And that sometimes, the most dangerous criminal is the one who values loyalty above freedom. And that brings us to the end of our story. If you liked it, don't forget to like and subscribe and activate the bell button so you can receive new videos.